Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Who's this?
Hi, this is Jen from Vermont. I met you guys in Boston, so
Jen.
just excited to talk to you again.
Hey.
Thanks
how's
for
it
calling
going?
in and helping us with this test.
Yes.
Good. Yeah, absolutely. So whatever you guys just did with her, I heard you say put her into the green thing, and then just so you know, as a person on hold, it went completely silent for me while you did that. So just a little feedback. Yeah, just so you know.
Okay.
But yeah, this is really cool. And while I was on hold, I was able to hear the whole rest of the show. So definitely still able to kind of pick up on it. So that's awesome.
Perfect. And I mean, we're testing our equipment, but that's like really boring for everybody. We're all super interested in it, but nobody else is going to be interested. So I appreciate you helping with the test. But also, if you have a question, please feel free to ask it, because we also want to give some value back to people who are calling in and helping us out.
Yeah. So kind of, I guess not necessarily like a specific question, but looking for your take on this. I've heard you guys talk a lot about ego work, and it's something that I have definitely been working on a bit as well. And something for me that I think has really helped is presence, and really trying to stay, in the moment and in the now. And I was just kind of wondering your thoughts, if you think that is a good access point, if you found other ways to really help yourself with it, and what your thoughts are.
You want to take this one, or want me to?
So I'm sorry, I tuned you out when you were asking the question because I
heard it.
I'm so sorry, Jen. I didn't mean to do that. I was like, do I be honest here, or do I try to cover myself? And I'm like, oh crap, I just gotta be honest.
I love the honesty.
Like, man, I'm just gonna be.
Because Joel's trying to make sure if everybody else in the live can hear you.
I'm thinking about all this audio stuff, and she was talking to you, and I'm like, I just.
I'm
so sorry. Would you just ask that one more time, and I'll actually repeat the question.
I'll make sure that I know what she's asking, and then when I repeat back then that will be how you know what the question is.
I totally screwed that one up.
No, you didn't.
No, I mean, it's funny.
All right. I mean, you're doing tech and content at the same time. It's never easy. All right. So what I hear you saying, Jen, is that we talk a lot about ego work, which is something that is really top of mind for you right now. And one of the things that you've been doing to facilitate some of your ego work is presence work. And you were checking in to see if we think that that's like a good thing to address ego. And then if you had any modifier at the end of that, I didn't catch that part. But is that the gist of your question?
Yeah, that was basically it. Or just if you have a better access point other than presence work. That was just the end piece.
Okay. So I think presence work is maybe the only true way to get to a place where your ego. Okay, so let's define ego work first, and then we'll talk about why presence work is such a good thing for ego work. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So ego work is defined by different people as different things. When we talk about ego work, we're usually talking about the part of us that identifies as ourselves, the part of us that wants to live, the part of us that has agenda, the part of us that desires to survive, and is always making sure that we're going to be okay, and we can sort of that we're going to be able to perpetuate our survival. And so the ego is like a really super duper important thing if we think life is an important thing. Like if we think life is a good thing, then the ego is a very understandable evolutionary byproduct, which is the part of us that wants to survive. The challenge is that there are many things that sort of evolved with the ego that aren't as useful to us anymore because evolution is so slow. And our technologies have brought us way past where a lot of our ego fears and triggers, and the parts of us that are pretty sure that, that's going to mean death for us, when it really doesn't. It just means embarrassment, or that's not an okay situation. We need to hoard our resources and make sure that we can't share them and be grabby, because we're not going to be able to make it through the winter, because that's a super duper old piece of programming from a time period where making it through the winter was a big deal. So the ego is the part of us that sort of identifies as itself and wants to continue living. And so sort of written in that is this idea of anxiety about the future and guilt or sadness about the past. Because when the ego dwells on things that were, that's when it oftentimes has hijacking behaviors. Hijacking behaviors as in like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, or they shouldn't have done that to me, or that wasn't okay, or whatever it is, like whatever makes you, when you review the past, like get all triggered about it. And then when we future pace, the most common emotion that is the ego trying to hijack the whole system when we think about the future is anxiety. What's going to happen next? How are we going to be okay? So those are all the things that the ego is really sort of really preoccupied with. And the reason why I think what you're doing, which is presence work, is so fantastic, is that it reminds the whole system, the ego and whatever lives outside of ego, whatever that is, that really the past doesn't exist anymore. Not really. Like, it exists in our minds and in our memories, but it's not a real thing right now. All we're really experiencing is the present moment. So anything that's happened in the past, while it can, while we're in the ego, inform future behaviors and help us look for patterns and sort of understand how things work and make better decisions, it doesn't really, like the idea that it has a hold on us is, it's a myth, right? Like, the past doesn't really truly define us. It's fed into the system of who we are, and part of the emergent is whatever we've held on from the past, but it's not a thing anymore. It's not real. It lives entirely in our imagination. And the same thing with the future. The future hasn't happened yet, so it's not real either. So our anxieties about it may or may not ever manifest, because we don't really know what's going on there, since it's all simulations, and it's all in our imagination there too. But the present, as far as we can tell, does exist. I mean, if we're going to pretend like this is all existence, right? This does exist. I am right here, right now, right? As far as I can tell. And this is the moment that actually is. And when we get really good at resting into the moment, the overwhelming majority of the moments that we're living in now are not threatening. Like, the overwhelming majority of them are not. Like, most of the time, especially when we're in a developed country, the here and now is not a threatening place to be. But when we bring all of these, like these stories from the past, or these anxieties about the future, when we bring all of that in, then it can feel very threatening, right? Because maybe something bad happened to us in the past that we still have attached to us, and we haven't worked through that trauma. Or maybe we think that we're not going to be okay in the future. So if we grab all the baggage from our imagination, from the past and the future, into the now, then the now feels threatening. But when we let go and release that and just truly act and behave as like what is truly happening now, most of the time it's like, I'm sitting. That's actually what is happening right now. I'm talking to a camera, and ostensibly there are people watching. That is actually what's happening right now. And most of the time, if we are present to the moment, we realize how much of our fears and our anxieties and our guilt and our sadness and our trauma, they're living inside of our imagination. They're trapped by the ego, because the ego is hoping that we'll hold them as lessons. The ego is hoping that we'll make sure to hold on to those things, so we maintain vigilance, and that we won't allow ourselves to be, like maybe in the past, fool me once, shame on you, but fool me twice, shame on me, right? And so I've got to hold on to those moments so that I can take them as lessons and never repeat that experience. And when you do real presence work, and one of my favorite presence work is in Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now. That's one of like my favorite ways of looking at it. When you get to that, and by the way, I totally recommend reading that book if you haven't yet. But when you do true,
that's an awesome book.
Yeah. Okay. So you know what I'm talking about. When you do true authentic presence work, then you know how much of the ego's challenges are actually living in the imagination. They're not realities that we've actually experienced. They're things we're pulling on from other people. They're borrowed experiences. They're unprocessed emotions. They're fears about what could be happening next that haven't really manifested, and we may or may not have any solid evidence for them ever manifesting. They could just be fears for some reason. So to me, the presence work is so good because it helps us watch our ego dance. Because all of that shit that I'm talking about, all that emotion, all that sadness and grief and guilt from the past, and all that projection of anxiety that we do when we think about the future, is all of it's just our ego dancing, right? It's just trying to have like almost what we call a tennis hop, which is it's got to be ready. It's got to be ready at any moment. And when you do real presence work and you go and you just breathe in and out, and then you just take an assessment of what's actually going on around you and realize that you're not in a moment of being threatened, then that's when you watch your ego dance. That's when you see all of its stories and narratives and all the ways in which it's authentically trying to help you. It's authentically trying to help you survive. It's there to serve you ultimately. And it gets a little hyper, like it gets a little overeager in its desire to serve, because it doesn't always know what the best thing to do is, since it lives in a place of uncertainty and vigilance all the time. And the more a person can sort of watch their ego dance, they can get familiar with the ego's narratives and stories. And then I call it Antonia-ing. Whenever I feel triggered, whenever I feel like something's coming up for me and like it's not okay and I got to do something about it, I just go, oh, I just Antonia'd all over the place, right? And I mean, every person does it. I don't know anybody who's truly transcended their ego, who doesn't get triggered, who doesn't have these moments, unless you're like, you know, like we talk about the Buddha that sits at the top of the mountain and like has rats chewing off their fingers while they're meditating because they're like so in a Zen place. With the exception of somebody like that, most of us who live in this world get triggered, and we Antonia eat all over the place, or we, you know, Jen all over the place, or we Joel all over the place. And we get really good at sort of seeing these narratives by being in the present moment, watching your ego dance. And then when you're in a situation, when you're still present, but there might be an authentic threat, there might be something that actually is legit happening, you can fillet out the difference between what is an ego projection and the general standard narratives that your ego comes up with versus the actual situation and handling it as it's actually being presented to you. And that's where most people's ego work lies. Is this an invention of my ego in my mind? Is this an invention of the ego to make sure that I'm always being vigilant no matter what, and all in this intense energy to make sure that nobody's pulling one over on me and I'm safe? Or is this like, no, my ego is chill and also there's a bad thing going on and I should probably address that? And when you get really good at seeing those distinctions between the reality of the situation versus the imagination of the situation, I think that that's where people's like ego work really serves them. It really helps them, because most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, we're not being threatened. Not really, not unless we're in a war-torn country or we're in like really unsafe environments. Most of the time, like in like countries like the United States, you know, like we're pretty much okay most of the time. And the people who would argue with that, the people are like, no, it's super unsafe, and most of us are living in an unsafe environment all the time. They haven't done a lot of ego work. They don't really know the difference between the ego's imagination versus and projections versus like legitimate threats. And so that's why I would say that what you're doing of presence work is probably one of the best facilitators of ego work. If you're not going to do psychedelics, like psychedelics is probably the fastest way to do ego work. But if you're going to do it in like a non-psychedelic way, which of course psychedelics are legal, so I'll recommend the non-psychedelic way. If you're going to do it that way, then meditation and presence work is hands down the best thing to do. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. It did, yeah. And I love the way you explain like watching your ego dance, because after doing presence work for a while, like having something come up that triggered it and just kind of stepping back mentally and just watching it happen and kind of laughing at it was such an amazing experience. So yeah, I thought that was a great way to.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm glad that was helpful. Did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Well, you did pretty good, complete thing. I would just say that for me, one of the things, even more the presence work that's been really helpful for me, is to ask myself the question, to what end, has been the best question I've asked myself for ego. So when I'm really attached to something and I go, to what end am I attached to this? Like, why am I'm going to follow this all the way down the timeline into the future. Quite frankly, it's not present work. It's looking into the future saying, like, why do I keep doubling down on this? What is at the end of this road? Like, if I keep following it all the way down its logical conclusion, where will this end up? And that's been super helpful to me, because I'm like, oh, that's the place I don't want to go in my own life or my own heart, or the way I don't want stuff to show up, right? So it's, to what end, I think, would be the question that has been powerful, that I'd recommend for people.
You mean like when your ego's holding on to something and you kind of go, what's the What's sort of the end of this trail? Like I
Yeah,
hold on to this, and then what ends up happening if.
Yeah, like let's say I'm in a disagreement with my ex-wife over something around my kids, and we're in a disagreement, and I feel like I want to win, and it triggers all that ego of wanting to win, and I have to go, okay, well, to what end do I want to win here? Why is this important? To what end am I attached to this thing? That's been the biggest help to me, because then I go, I'm attached to this just because she triggered something in me and I'm mad, or I just feel like I'm getting something I get real clarity on why, like my motivations. I think that's what it is. To what end leads me to, from an FI standpoint, from an introverted feeling ENFP standpoint, it leads me to my motivations of why I'm doing it. And to what end am I attached to this?
I was just going to say, Joel, that sounds exactly like something else I have heard you say of what emotions do I want to create. And as an ENFP also, that really resonates with me.
Yeah.
And to what end and what emotion am I looking for? They kind of go hand in hand, I think.
Yeah, because you get caught up in the emotion you're feeling right now.
For an FI user, at least.
Yeah, it feels so real what you're feeling, and it's hard to think in terms of, if I hold on to this, like, is this really what I want to? Is this what I want to be holding on to? I don't know. But yeah, I resonate with what you're saying too. That's cool.
Yeah, as a TI user, just to piggyback off of that, as a TI user, I think my style of question after the presence work is, whenever I'm triggered, whenever my ego is triggered, I think, what truth am I avoiding? Like, what truth do I not want to see? And lately, I've been easily triggered around anything that has to do with a leadership frame. Anything that has to do with leadership, or people wanting me to be a leader in any way. Like, I mean, we have a podcast, and I kind of set myself up as having microphone, and like, I've sort of positioned myself to like, be like, oh, people should be listening to me. I have things to say, like, and so what's ended up happening is that I feel like, or I've gotten feedback more and more that I should be stepping up into leadership more. And I'm super resistant to that, like really caustically resistant. So my ego has been getting triggered a lot around that, and anything that has to do with that. And so, so I've been watching my ego dance around leadership. And so every time I get like upset or frustrated or feel like, like triggered, I always ask myself, what truth am I avoiding? And recently I figured out I have a bunch of stuff around leadership that I have to make peace with, and I have to figure out inside of myself. So, so for the feeling piece, it's like what's my intent and motivation? What's the emotion I want to be feeling? Why am I attaching to this emotion? And then for somebody who's using TI, and this of course would be anywhere in your stack, for somebody who's using TI, it would be more like, what truth am I avoiding? What is the thing I don't want to have to acknowledge or think about? What like a cognitive can am I kicking down the road? And then that takes that concept of the presence work and just watching the ego dance, that takes it now to the next level of like now doing some diagnostic, now doing some prescription too, some personal prescription that helps go to whatever is your next personal development project potentially. So yeah, I don't know that think that maybe that is less helpful to you as an ENFP. But for people who are listening that might use TI, that's been more helpful to me than the emotional component, because I usually don't know why I'm feeling what I'm feeling, and that doesn't garner me very many answers. Like, what am I feeling? I don't even know. Yep. All right. So was that complete? Or do you feel complete, Jen?
Oh yeah,
okay.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, and thank you for helping us test out the audio. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay,
so what you can do is you can put her back onto, you can either put her there.
Okay.
And now she can still hear us, or you could cancel her. Now, before you cancel her, you can let them hang up. I don't know, but that could also be something we do to knock them off. By the way, if you're just joining us, we're doing an audio test today for a call-in show that we'd like to produce soon. We keep doing tests for these, and anything like we do here at Personality Hacker, we like to give actual value, not just do something. So we're actually literally answering real questions as we do this test to try to give value back as we test some of our systems.
All right. So when Jen hung up, she went off the switchboard.
So Aaliyah, thank you for being on, by the way. If you have something else to do, you've been on here for, it says here like 20 minutes. So I want to say I appreciate it. If you have to go, we totally understand.
Yes.
I just realized I told you to stay on, and it's like we're just hijacking your day. So feel free to go if you have to go.
Yeah.
There's an 817 number that called in that we'd like to go live to now on here. And again, when we have a moderator, they'll be able to ask for names and like topics. But right now we just have the numbers. So let's go to 817. Hi, who is this?
Hi, This is Julie from Fort Worth, Texas.
Hi,
Hi,
Julie, from Fort Worth, Texas.
Hi.
You sound
Yeah, you
excited
guys have
and
talked to
motivated.
me. No, I talked to you guys in the last live stream that you guys did. I had the question about the ISTP.
Got it. Cool. Well, welcome back.
Yeah. Well, I do have a question for you guys, and it was something that I heard in one of your podcasts. You guys were talking about, specifically you, Antonia, were talking about how you, when you play back memories, they're like gifts. I wanted to delve into that more because that's a phenomenon I've experienced, and I'm a writer, and I write a lot about my own experiences, so I was wondering if there's a way to build that skill, because it takes a lot out of me to try and be present enough to remember anything more than the feelings or thoughts I had during an event. I tell people pictures are my favorite souvenirs because I'm not going to remember half of this tomorrow.
I don't remember if you told me your best fit type last time, but do you have a best fit type?
I am. I'm an ENFP.
Okay. All right. So
2 ENFPs on the call already.
yeah.
We're the most experimental. We'll
It's
come on
true.
and test stuff with
That's
us, right?
Well, no, Leah was on. She's a 9FJ.
All right.
But
that's
Aaliyah is
fair.
always just helpful. That's her core competency is Aaliyah is incredibly helpful. And very smart. Actually, smart's first and then helpful second. So as an ENFP, so you have introverted sensing or memory as your inferior 3-year-old. It's important not to conflate introverted sensing with having a good memory. Because that's not what we're trying to say when we use the word memory. What we're trying to say is that introverted sensing understands things best when they do capture of their experiences and impressions, and then review them over time, and then mine for gold and patterns using extroverted intuition as a way to mine all of those post-processing memories as a way to understand things and sort of understand who they are. So I just want to make sure that we're clear that we're not conflating introverted sensing with having a good memory. That said, there is a little bit of crossover. Right. There's a little bit of crossover because those of us who are leading with extroverted intuition are grabbing all the patterns in real time, right? Like in the moment of the experience. So we have a tendency to not be as diligent. We don't capture our experiences as diligently because we feel like we got enough the first time through. Like just experiencing it was where we caught all of our patterns. So we're not faithful recorders of our experiences as much because we don't see as much value in the review process, even though of course there's always value in the review, but that's the cost of specialization, right? That's just what happens when you have extroverted intuition as a driver. All right. So all of that said, all of that, but I'm just making sure that that's clear. So I talk about my memories as gifts because there's a couple moments that left deep impressions on me that are memories or times from the past for review that those are always available to me. There's like a limited set number of them, maybe half a dozen, that I can always go back and remember those moments because they left a deep impression on me. Like one time when I was 11 years old, I was riding my dirt bike and I fell and I dusted myself back off. And then later my leg thigh started like really itching. So I ran to the bathroom to figure out what it was. And apparently when I crashed my bike, a spider had been crawling up my leg. And when I fell, it embedded its head into my thigh. And there was a little spider that was still alive with its like legs going like this with its head embedded into my leg. Okay. I remember that. I have that memory like totally, completely, like I can access that one anytime because it was so disturbing to me. All right. But unless something is like that level of Piper will at night go, "Mommy, tell me about something from your childhood," and I just come up blank and I don't even know what to do about it. That said, recently we were hanging out with friends. We hang out with friends sometimes, and we go over to their house, and we just all like sort of turn off the lights, and we do projected lights up on the ceiling. And it's kind of like almost like a laser light show. And we listen to classic albums from the past. We listen to like, Pink Floyd or The Doors or whatever. And at one point I suggested that we listen to U2's Joshua Tree. Now, Joshua Tree was a really huge album when I was young. And so it was just kind of a cool thing to like sort of revisit it. And as we were going through the entire album, I started having these really, really like like fleshed out memories of certain time periods in my life, not even when the album was popular, but like sort of a friend of mine who had been really super duper into U2. I started having all of these memories of that friend and our interactions and the things that we did with, you know, like when we hung out with each other. And I started getting like so many, I felt like I was truly experiencing introverted sensing for the first time. I was like, that was an amazing experience because it was fleshed out. It wasn't like this 4-second little GIF that sort of puts on itself on loop or whatever. So I figured out that for me, one of my best totems, and I started using the word totem as anything that helps me remember something from the past. So I call them totems. My best totem is music, hands down. And so, and it takes a lot of time to get there. So I have to be patient. I can't just listen to a song and expect it to like, you know, proffer a deep, intricate memory. I have to do something like be very quiet, have no distractions, nothing new, something very, very, very like something I'm used to, because that hanging out with friends and listening to full albums is something we'd done like many times in the past. So it wasn't like nothing was new in the context. Everything was like really chill, something I was very familiar with. And then it took me about until half the album to really start getting into that. So I think when you ask if you can get better at that, I think the answer is probably yes. All of these cognitive functions I see as sort of skills to develop. I think we just don't develop them because we prefer other functions more and better. But if you really want to get into that space, I would recommend you figure out what your totems are. Now, I'm auditory, so it makes sense that music is the thing for me. It seems like pictures are the thing for you. Or at least that's what you said.
Yeah.
Take a picture, I won't remember. But it might not be. Like if you're a really visual person, pictures probably are really good. And so, so like just kind of figuring out what the best totems for you, and then be super patient. Don't expect it to happen quickly because this is a very baby little inferior function for you. So be like let it take some time, have no new distractions around you. This is almost like introverted intuition and extroverted sensing. Introverted intuition is at its best when it has no extroverted sensing like stimuli working. Well, introverted sensing works best when it has no new, like for extroverted sense or introverted intuition, it's any stimuli, it's like sensory stimuli. For introverted sensing, the thing that will disrupt it is novelty. So it can't have any novelty around it. Nothing new that it's trying to pattern or like figure out the pattern of. It has to be a very, very, very familiar space. And then once you get into that space and you have your totems, maybe it's going through picture albums or whatever it is for you, give yourself plenty of time. It might take like an album's like what, over an hour, and it took me 30 minutes to get there. So give yourself plenty of time in that space, and then see if you can start recalling these memories with greater fidelity. And it might just happen to you. It might not be a memory that you can directly go to. But if you do this often enough, you might be able to start controlling the process and go to specific time periods. And then afterwards, be a faithful recorder, not in your head, but write it down or take an audio memo, you know, like a memo. And then you will have that memory to go back and review and revisit, and then revisit those memories on a regular basis, right? The ones that you recorded, go read them, go listen to them. And that's just kind of like, it's kind of like doing cardio in order to get your, you know, like to get your entire body stronger. It's just sort of an exercise to do repeatedly in order to get to a place where now your mind is like, okay, this is an important thing that we're doing now. And it sort of builds that muscle. Does that make sense to you?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I remember it's the same trip that I talked about in the last question. I remember we were walking around Annapolis, and I had to physically force myself to be present enough just to remember what was going on around me, because I kept like, you know, I was in a new city exploring, and I was like, but I want to remember this too. So it was like constant conflict of like, do I sit here and, you know, explore the city, or do I decide what I want to remember about this? And I found that my memories from that day are very impressionistic and more about what I was thinking and feeling, and not the actual city itself. So, you know.
Yeah, well, because what you're gonna capture, your extroverted intuition is gonna capture all the patterns. That's the thing that's most interesting to it. So I have an extraordinary memory for patterns and content, right? I remember almost every system I've ever read. I have a really good memory for like references and books I've read things in and that kind of thing. But I have like no memory of most of the houses I grew up in, right? Because that's just not something my brain is like, it's not prioritizing. And so we're looking for the patterns because that's the thing we want to capture. We want to capture the patterns, which is why we don't do a lot of review of the past, because if we've already captured the patterns we were looking for to begin with, that was the thing we want to remember. And so like you said, you're remembering how you felt about it and sort of maybe the ideas you were thinking at the time. You're capturing all the patterns that were going through your extroverted intuition. And so yeah, you have to, all us ENPs in particular have to make a conscious effort to start recording just what's happening. Like none of the patterns, nothing that's coming up for you, just recording what's happening. And then going back later and post-processing it for the patterns. And that feels excruciatingly slow to any. Like that process of capture and then post-process and review and then find all the patterns. Oh my gosh, that feels so laborious. Why not just pick up the patterns the first time through? And the answer is because then you don't get the memory, right? Because then everything that wasn't part of the pattern, you toss. So yeah, so that's what it is. You have to get like really, I guess the word is patient. Like patience is the number one thing that any needs to develop if they're going to really work on their introverted sensing. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Does that help at all?
I think so.
Okay. I told you to do a bunch of stuff that you're probably not going to want to do because none of us want to do anything in our introverted function or our inferior function. You're like, that also
but I know it will help with all the writing, so.
Yeah. And of course, as you do it, you'll get more proficient. It will be faster. You'll have more control over the process. But it's like anytime we work on our 3-year-old or inferior, it's like we have these little tiny itsy bitsy baby muscles. And it's like, how do I go lift 100 pounds? Right. And it's like, well, you got to lift 10 pounds first and then 15 pounds and then 20 pounds. Right. And it's like, oh yeah, I guess I do have to do all that stuff. Ugh. Like it just doesn't feel good. Yeah.
That's why I hate going to the gym.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. All right. Do you as a fellow ENFP have things you want to say about that?
Well, I mean, I think you guys identified it as the modality, the encoding modality of the memories themselves. For example, for me, when I'm embodying something or when I'm traveling to the place that the memory existed as a kinesthetic person, that's when those memories are more visceral for me. Those are my totems, being there physically. Being in my parents' old house, all the memories come back to me because I'm not visual, I'm not auditory. Yours is music. And my guess for you is it's visual, right? Pictures or some kind of impression moments,
right?
Like visual imagery. So I mean, it's just a general comment that I think that's how we encode memories. And so most people, how to access those visually. Some people may not be aware that that's how they would access their memories if they're SI inferior or introverted sensing inferior based on the modality they encoded them with. And also I would say FI probably also has more of a proclivity to being embodied. So even as an ENFP that's visual, you might, if you embody it, either acting something out from your past or going to those locations or imagining those scenarios in an embodied way. That's been really powerful for me to access things that have happened in the past and really think through them from a memory standpoint.
You are also, Joel does a lot of journaling. He's been journaling forever. I'm terrible at journaling. But because he's so good at journaling, I think you actually also have better access to your past by having recorded it. And now he's not like, dear diary, today, blah, 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 blah. His journals are all over the place. They're like pictures and schematics and impressions and what he's working on and how he feels and moments in time and all that stuff. Like it's not what normally people would think of as journal or a diary, but I think those are also totems for you. I think you can go back and kind of figure out what was happening in your life based on your journal. So I think journaling is also a really good practice.
The struggle is real though.
Right.
Yeah, the struggle is real.
I get it.
All right. Do you feel complete, by the way? Did we answer your question? I hope we did.
Or at least talk to you enough to make you feel good.
Yeah, because there's nobody else on. And by the way, if anybody else wants to call, the number is 646-787-1872.
And we're live right now. So if you're watching this recording back, obviously
you cannot do that.
Do the math.
Yeah.
Do the time math. You won't be able to reach us on the recording.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for calling in and being a part of this.
Yeah,
Love to talk to you further, more in the future.
You are very welcome.
Right.
Yeah, and enjoy Texas. Hopefully it's not too hot yet this summer.
No, not too hot yet. We had some nasty storms the other day, but
yeah.
All right. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to end this call. Please do not think I'm weird about ending calls. Okay. But I'm going to end the call, and thank you so much for calling in. All right.
You're very welcome.
Cheers. All right, so that was the first time I hung somebody up. So we're just
hanging up on people now.
I'm hanging up on people. We're just testing all of this out, answering questions in the meantime. Somebody just called in. This is live. I actually have to go to the bathroom.
All right.
I did yoga right before this, and I ran here from yoga, which of course is why I'm like super dressed up for all this. And
Why
I
don't
drank a
you
lot of
run
water.
and go fast?
And I realized our on-air thing isn't turned on. Should I go turn it on just for being cool?
No, go to the bathroom.
Okay.
And then, yeah,
Okay.
we're all good. I
There's
think.
somebody on the phone.
All right, so I should go here. Well, do you want me to wait for you?
Yeah.
Just rush, make it happen. So thanks everybody for being a part of this test. By the way, this is something we want to. I don't know if this might be something new you've just watched, whether it's live you're watching or if it's a recording. We're planning on hopefully doing one of these live video call-in shows, probably an hour or two each week. That's the dream. That's the vision of what we want to do. And we believe it will be a really powerful experience. We'd love to just start off doing Q&A like we're doing right now in the test format, and then eventually have other people come on as guests. So for example, I'm pulling stuff out of my head, but like somebody like Beatrice Chestnut, who understands a lot about the Enneagram, she can come on as a guest host with us. So the three of us would be here taking live questions about Enneagram. Or maybe we have Dr. Dario Nardi talking about the neuroscience of personality and some of his research that he has done with brain scan technology and understanding personality types and cognitive functions using brain scan technology. So these are some things that we have in the works. I mean, not those specific people, although those are probably some of the most likely people to come on live with us because we do have relationships with those people. That's why I mentioned them. But these are some of the ideas we have of this live show. So we've got a studio set up. We have some of the technical stuff we're still testing around the audio and the video pieces. We think we've got the audio dialed in now, and then we got to work on some video because we're just doing less of a webcam. So just to kind of cast a vision for what we're planning, what we're excited about coming forward in the future, I think that this could be really a really great show. And I think a lot of people would get a lot of benefit from it. So we're going to go to a 706 number. 706. Hi, who's this?
Elizabeth Murray or Elizabeth Byron. Sorry, I just got married.
Elizabeth, you just got married, so you changed your name and you forgot. Is that what it was?
Yes.
Elizabeth, do we know you?
Congratulations, by the way,
Have we met you?
For getting married. That's awesome.
Yes, you have in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember. Congratulations.
Yeah, you and your boyfriend and then or fiance came to the meetup in Atlanta this past, was it last spring? A year ago?
Yeah.
I don't remember when we were in Atlanta.
Yes.
Last, but cool.
When y'all coming back?
We got to make it down there soon because Atlanta is one of the cities that we have a great turnout when we come do live events there or live meetups. Like it's one of the biggest, probably the biggest cluster of people. Los Angeles and Atlanta have been the two biggest spaces right now. So yeah, we'll make it down there probably next year.
Yeah, but in the meantime, like Joel said,
Awesome.
Congratulations on getting married.
Yeah. How's married life treating you? Good?
Thank you. I'm sorry?
How is married life treating you? Well?
Good. It's not that different. Trying to buy a house, be an adult, all that crap.
Yeah.
Yep.
Welcome. It's a lot of that. A lot of adulting.
It's just a lot of that.
All over the place. But it can be amazing, right? You're in a new relationship. It's exciting. You are embarking on this adventure with this person that you're in love with. So that can be truly exciting and truly like that's encouraging that you found the person you want to be with. So congratulations for that.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth, did you have a question today or something you want to talk about live on the air?
Yes. So I had a question. Because you guys deal with a lot of people, obviously on a day-to-day basis. I was wondering how you guys talk and progress through friendships and relationships who are completely with people who are completely different than you. Like for instance, and the reason why this question came up was I was having a conversation with my mom the other day about abortion, and I realized she is coming from a very sweet place where she doesn't want to see lives lost. And then I am also coming from that same place. So we're coming from good places, well-intentioned places, but our mindsets are completely different about what that good place is at. So how do you overcome these boundaries when good intentions are wanting to be given all around, if that makes any sense?
Yeah. What, just as a general statement, you might have something specific.
No, I was just going to ask a question, a clarifying question. But
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so is the question, how do you have higher quality conversations like that? Or is the question, how do you persuade people to see your side if they're having a hard time seeing your side?
Well, sometimes people aren't very good at seeing your side and then agreeing to disagree. How do you keep volatile conversations with people who mean well and get each other to understand each other?
Yeah.
Like, is there like a way through cognitive function, or like finding a similar cognitive function or something that's like the mind trail that I'm on, at least? I don't know.
Yeah. So a general statement, one of the things I always look at when I see conflict with myself, other people, two people outside myself, the first thing I look at is, where is the conflict? Is the conflict around something that we disagree on what to do about? Or is the conflict around a worldview that we can't see the same way? Like, we can't see the same viewpoint. So one thing I personally typically do is I try to categorize it into one of those two areas, because when you talk about your mom, like, it may be that you think your conflict or friction point, for example, is around the decision. Like, let's just use cognitive functions as a way to talk about this, as like a metaphor to talk about this, like the decision-making function. Are we seeing the same reality, and the disagreement is what to do about that reality, which is one way of disagreement can show up. And the other way is, and I guess there's a third way, which is both. You see a different reality and it's hard to agree on anything. The other one that I've often noticed is people don't see the same reality. So it's not that we're disagreeing on what to do about what we're seeing, and we can't even agree on what we're seeing in the first place. From my standpoint, it seems like in our modern world, that's more of the conflict. That's more of the disagreement that's where I see more of disagreements coming in my own life and the people I know around me. It's not that we're both seeing the same worldview or seeing the same viewpoint, and then we have conflict or difficulty deciding what to do about that viewpoint. I usually am not seeing the same viewpoint as the person at all. And so it's less about conflict resolution. It's more about reconciliation of our view of the world. Right. And you gonna say something? I think I might cut you off. Oh, maybe it was just noise in the background. Yeah. So I think that's what the biggest thing that I think of in the first place is I categorize where is it happening? Where's the friction point? Is it in my worldview or is it in my decision making? And it's very rare when I'm in engagement where in these days where it's not in the worldview side of things. That seems to be where all the conversations are right now. And I think that's why in our modern world, it's such a frustrating experience to be on social media, to be on Facebook, to be in groups where we say something and then people may come in like, how dare you say that? It's like, wait, it doesn't even feel like you're disagreeing on the thing. It feels like we're not even seeing the same reality in the first place. So I think that's the biggest piece. So do you feel like you and your mom, which category do you guys think you are in? Are you in the category of, are you seeing the same worldview and disagreeing about the results of that worldview? Or do you think you're not even seeing the same worldview together at all?
Trying to figure out how to put it. We both have very different worldviews, I guess. And but we want good out of our separate worldviews.
So just what I hear you saying right there is the motivations are the same. We want goodness. We want to bring positivity. We want to bring life-affirming things or whatever it is that we both believe in. Those are matched up. So our core values might be matched up, but the lens in which we see the world and the problems of the world might be different. So we have the same values, but the problems we identify to apply those values to are different. So I guess what I hear that to see, or I hear that as a worldview discord. because you're kind of in alignment with the decisions you would make. Like when you're presented with a thing that you can agree on, I see the color red here. I also see the color red here. Okay, what are we going to do about the color red? Well, let's apply our core values that we actually agree upon. But the challenge comes in if you have similar core values, but you see the color red and your mom might see the color blue. How do those core values are applied differently to the color red and the color blue, right? Those are different kinds of application of what to do about those things based on the quote unquote metaphorical color you're seeing or the viewpoint or the worldview you're seeing. So, I mean, that's how I see it from what you just described. So that in lies the challenge of our modern world is how do we align people that literally have a different version of reality, and it's getting more splintered every day. Like that's a meta question that I ask myself every morning when I get up, quite frankly. I mean, that's basically why we do Personality Hacker. That's a lot of why we do Personality Hacker is because of that challenge. It's only getting more extreme as life goes on.
Well, and if I remember correctly, your best fit type is INFJ, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, all right. People who use the cognitive function of introverted intuition, or NI, we nicknamed it perspectives for a reason. People who use introverted intuition usually, unless they're for some reason actively turning it off because they're afraid that it'll get hijacked, if they are in an open receiving space, they're usually pretty good at being able to kind of play in somebody else's worldview sandbox to some extent. They're able to kind of meet them there and sort of understand like maybe why they're thinking what they're thinking. But other types that don't use introverted intuition don't have that as easily accessible to them. Do you know what your mom's best fit type is? Do you suspect?
I think she's an ESFJ, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So what you're talking about there is that what I hear then is that you both come from a value judging space of extroverted feeling, or what we call harmony. So yeah, you both are like trying to figure out what is best for everyone. So you're going to meet at your values. Right. But she's going to be using introverted sensing as her primary way of understanding how that like she's going to be using her own experiences and impressions and the people that were influential to her. She's going to be using them as a way to sort of organize the world. And if you don't match something that she's used to or has seen before, or that she has been open to in the past, then it's not going to feel like this is going to be something that her mind might have like an autoresponder to reject, especially if she's been told at certain points that the other side is a dangerous other side. So what you're trying to navigate around then is it's not just the communication piece, which there are really, really helpful communication strategies and models and books. Like one of my favorite books for this is Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg, right? Marshall Rosenberg?
I don't remember the last name.
Anyway, Nonviolent Communication is a fantastic book for helping navigate communication spaces. So I do recommend checking out those kinds of things for the communication piece. But if we're just going to look at it through the lens of functions, what you're trying to do is you probably are having an easier time of seeing where she's coming from than she is where you're coming from. And what ends up happening is that feels laborious to the person who is capable of perspective shifting. That's really hard because they're doing the work of coming to the other person, but it doesn't feel like the other person is doing the work of coming to them. And it might just be because like your mom is leading with a judging function. You're leading with a perceiving function. That means that in these conversations, you're far more likely to sort of hold space for the ideas that she's giving to you, whereas she's less likely to hold space for the ideas you're giving to her if they are striking her judging function as not good. So her extroverted feeling, her driver process, which is the first lens she's going to see the world through, if that is getting triggered for some reason, she's far more likely to sort of push it away and go, no, I'm not supposed to think that, right? And not even let her introverted sensing component get a word in edgewise because her dominant function already said no. So there are ways though, because what's nice is that her extroverted feeling when you're talking about something conceptual is conceptualizing the topic, but you're not conceptual for her. All right. You're a real person. you're her daughter who she loves. I'm assuming, since you're still in a relationship with each other, your needs are also important to her. So one of the things that I would do if I was trying to just not even get her to agree, it doesn't really even sound like you're trying to get her to agree. You're just trying to have like a pleasant conversation where she can understand where you're coming from. One of the things I would do.
I want her to not think I'm a murderer.
Right. Yeah. You don't want her to think bad things about you.
For murder.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Sorry. Go ahead and complete your thought.
No, I just want, I want her to not think that I'm a horrible person and understand where I'm coming from. Communication is hard when, like you said, she's completely, she's grounded in that dominant function, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Right. So one of the ways to get to her to understand you, not necessarily agree. It doesn't even sound like you're trying to get to agreeing, which is good because that's like one of the great mysteries of life, right? But you're just trying to get her to understanding. And so one of the challenges that anytime you go conceptual, her extroverted feeling is also going to go conceptual. It's going to think in terms of, like what she believes are needs going unmet and the best thing to do for everybody, but based on a concept. But you're not trying to get her into conceptual space. You're trying to get her into a personal space. You're trying to get her to understand you as a human being, right? And so one of the things you can do in the conversation is alter the conversation from something conceptual and truly turn it into something personal. Like, okay, so mom, I don't actually need you to agree with me, and my belief or my feeling on this topic might actually anger you. Like you might feel like I'm doing things to be intentionally upsetting to you. Like it might feel like you're like I'm doing this to you. Like my beliefs, my thoughts are threatening to you. Now remember, she's also using introverted thinking as her 3-year-old or inferior function. And the further down a function is in the stack, the less space we have to hold for other people and the less territory we're taking in. So what you're trying to ask her to do is hold space for a thought that she finds personally offensive. And so you're like in the conversation, you're leaning on her 3-year-old unknowingly. Does that make sense? Like you're trying to get her to open up her 3-year-old to you when her driver function is in complete rejection mode. That's probably not how, that's not going to work. So conversationally, you need to get her into her co-pilot of introverted sensing, and introverted sensing understands the quirks of the individual human experience, right? Like they understand that every person is different based on the experiences that they've had. So one of the things I might do is I might kind of talk about the etymology of how you feel. Like first I would address it by going, I just want you to know that my goal here is not to get you to agree with me. Like I don't need you to agree with me. I'm not asking that. And I also don't want to at any time make you feel like you're compromising your morals in this conversation. Like I don't want you feeling like you're out of integrity with your own morality. And I want you to know that I honor your right to have whatever worldview you want. Like I like basically lots of statements of empathy and understanding, lots of statements of getting like, the goal here is not to get you to agree with me or to question your worldview. I just want you to know where I'm coming from because of our relationship, because you're my mom and I'm your daughter. And I want you to know that I want us to be good. And I want you to know that I love you, but I also want to feel understood. Like that's really my goal here is not to get you to agree with me. My goal is to feel like my mom understands where I'm coming from, even if she doesn't agree with me. So if you come from it sort of like set a lot of expectations around what your goal is, in these conversations, one of the reasons why it descends is I suspect that we project agendas onto each other. We do a lot of like, that person's agenda in this conversation is to get me to change my mind or whatever. But if you just lay out what your agenda is at the beginning, right? This is my agenda. This is what I'm trying to accomplish. I would like you to understand where I'm coming from. That's it. Everything else is totally 100% you. And then appeal to, and if you can get through a barrier in that, you can kind of feel it energetically where she's like, okay, I understand that. I'd like to understand where, like I'd like to understand my daughter too. It's not even understanding my thoughts or where I'm coming from. It's understanding you as a person, right? And then if you can get past that first line of defense where she's going to be in that judging function and just trying to judge everything, if you can get her into a perceiving function of just sort of learning about you and go, here are some of the experiences I've had in the past that appeals to her introverted sensing, right? Like, you know that people are different based on the experiences that they've had. Here are some of the experiences I've had that kind of make me see the world the way that I do, right? And then appeal to the introverted sensing. And then anytime there's like something you say that gets her all triggered, just be like, again, I would like to remind you that, or like, just, I want you to remember that I'm not here to change your mind or to offend, like make you compromise any of your values. I just want you to understand me as a person and the experiences I've had throughout my life. So all of this language that sort of opens up introverted sensing. And then at the moment, she might say a bunch of stuff that's offensive, right? Like it might be like, no, I still blah, 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 blah. And like, and it might not be like, it might not be that pleasant of a conversation. But remember, introverted sensing goes back and reviews everything. So what will happen is that she'll capture the conversation. And what I might even do is seed that recommendation. It's like, well, you know what? Why don't you think about this conversation? Or why don't you think about this for a little while? I don't want you to say anything right now. Why don't you just like think about what we've talked about? And then what will happen is if she takes your suggestion, that's when her extroverted intuition patterning, her 10-year-old or tertiary, that's when it will go back and see some of those patterns. It will see, yeah, you really aren't aggressive or antagonistic. Yeah, you really aren't trying to get her to, change her mind. She'll just kind of ruminate over the conversation, and then that's where her patterning comes. And if there's any openness she has at all, that's when that will happen, is in the post-processing. And you'll probably find yourself having increasingly better conversations over time. It might not be great the second conversation, but if you just kind of follow this pattern, announcing your agenda to begin with, letting her extroverted feeling and introverted thinking know right away that you're not trying to get it to compromise its integrity, right? You're just trying to get her into an understanding space, and that you know that over time, introverted sensing is the most adaptable function over time. It always takes time and patience. And then over time, you'll probably see her be less and less prickly about the subject. Does that sound right? Or does that sound like it might work with your mom?
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a pattern from the past. So it definitely resonates.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And read Nonviolent Communication, because it's a brilliant book, even if you don't employ it in this particular situation.
Yeah. And remember the question that you and your mom are asking each other, like all the words you use are just the words, but the real question you're asking, every word you use, every sentence you state to your mother, every question you ask, every conversation you have, you're saying two things. You're asking, do you love me? And you're saying, yes, I love you. Mm-hmm. With all of that communication, your mom's doing the same thing. Like that's what's energetically happening underneath the surface. Mm-hmm. Is you're both going, do you love me? And you're waiting for the response to be, yes, I love you. Like that's literally what's happening energetically with somebody that's in a loving relationship, like a mother-child relationship. Mm-hmm. And I think also for anybody else listening too, all of us can practice not projecting core values or disagreement onto worldview differences. I think this is the biggest egregiousness of our time. Is I see something here and somebody sees something here and they say I'm bad and wrong because I don't see the world the way they do. Or I project onto them and say they're bad and wrong because they don't see the world out the way I do. And that's just the viewpoint you bring to the world. That's not the decisions you make. Now, if they make decisions that I disagree with, I can see that saying, I don't know if I think you're behaving in an ethical way I don't agree with. But it's not ethical to see the world in a viewpoint. Like there's no ethics to how we see what we see. Our perceiving processes, how we see the world and show up, is that's how we're wired. That's what we're doing. Now, what we do about what we see, the ethics can come into that. But the reality that we see, which a lot of us see different realities, to project morality or ethics onto a reality difference, that's one of the most disingenuous things I think people do, to say, well, you don't see the world I see it, so you're bad and wrong. It's like, how could you say that to anybody? Like, you wouldn't want somebody saying that to you. So I think that's the biggest key for me, is to see that difference and really try to hold space. That's when we talk about holding space. We're saying you get the right to see the world in the way you see it. A lot of people don't agree with me on that stance, right? But I think everybody gets the right to see the world the way they're wired. I don't think we can force people to have to conform to reality they just can't perceive themselves. So that's that's something else that I guess to take into account as well.
So Aaliyah in the chat said something really valuable. She said, another thought is that if her belief is rooted in a value, and if she has introverted thinking as a 3-year-old, she will likely constantly be questioning and criticizing her own ability as a good mother if you have a belief that is different than hers. So validating how she raised you to be your own person, to be strong may help. That's dead on. Dead
Validating her introverted side.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. She would definitely enjoy that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, you raised me to be a strong, independent person. You raised me to be thoughtful, right? You're brilliant, Aaliyah.
Yeah.
Such a good thought.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, I'm done.
All right.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes,
for
thank you
calling
so
in.
much for calling in. Really appreciate it.
We had
Thank
somebody.
you.
Thank you, by the way. We had somebody else on hold, but they dropped off.
They dropped off
it was
probably because it was too long.
too long of a wait, but that's cool.
All right.
If you want to call in, we can also wrap up as the test.
Yeah,
I think we got some good audio.
I think we got some good audio here. It's been over an hour. We only have an hour and 20 minutes on our Blog Talk Radio right now as we're going through our testing phases. So we might want to complete. So I just want to get, for the people who are watching, does this a good format for you? Does this work?
You can hear the audio from the callers, okay? I think you can.
Mm-hmm.
And we may need to make more weird faces while callers are speaking.
Yeah.
To make something visually interesting on the screen.
Oh, you don't think there's just
because they can't see the caller? I don't know. Should we just
this? This is not right here.
I wasn't talking about you.
Okay.
You're visually interesting on the screen. I was talking about myself. I need to be more visually. I got to be careful not to say you're not visually interesting on the screen because I think you are. That wasn't what I was saying. How do I get out of this really quick? How do I back out of this whole thing? Thank you, by the way, for being here and joining us for this test. And we can't wait to continue testing these.
Yep.
Hopefully, we'll get to speak with everybody else very soon. When we get this test going down, we'll just bring in everybody. We'll announce it, send an email, and make it more of a formal thing. Probably a start and a finish, and a little more polished. But right now, we're just doing a lot of content to test it, because we think this could be a really great format for going forward. And
I'm realizing that this is these tests are really good too, because it helps us I can tell I have an awkwardness around talking over people on the phone because we're so used to just talking us. I can also tell that I felt weird about hanging up when the call was complete. So I got to work through that piece.
Okay.
So there's some sort of flow things that I think these tests are really going to help with. The number one thing that we're missing though is the camera we're going to end up using. We bought a camera. We've bought 3 cameras. None of them are the right camera. So
everything else is going good.
Everything else is going good.
The
Blog Tech Radio piece is really working well, which is awesome. So So I think we're just about there.
Cool.
Pam says I called but had a fussy baby. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, maybe the next time we do it. Nolan says I'm visually blown away.
That's right. Visually blown away. That's awesome.
Thank you, Helen.
That makes me feel good.
That's right. See, Joel, visually blown away. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being part of this test. We'll probably run another one very soon. We're getting closer and closer to doing these as a normal Thursday thing.
Wednesday or Tuesday.
Or Wednesday or
we don't know which
Tuesday
day
or
yet.
whatever day.
Don't promise days yet.
I'm not promising days. I'm sorry.
Thursday's probably going to be. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. I'm not promising days. All right. So we'll probably be doing this more often. And as we get closer to the time of it, we'll be running these tests more and more and more. So there was a long time between this test and the last one, but it'll probably be very quick until the next test because we're trying to get rocking and rolling on this. So don't be surprised if you see us do another one early next week, early mid next week. We'll see. No promises, because if I promise anything, Joel will
and keep making comments and have a discussion around this video too. It's cool. Keep exploring things.
And thank you to everybody who called in. We really appreciate it, truly, for helping us make these tests. And we'll talk to you guys next time, right?
Peace.
Peace out, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.